So, just a quick message before we get into the video. This video has been in the work for probably almost a month. So long that Black Friday's been, and I've got a new microphone, and the Christmas tree is up. This video was almost 2 hours long. A lot of time was spent in the editing and the researching and the comparison between Pokemon and D&D. So, if this video essay style is the kind of thing you like, I would really appreciate dropping a sub, a comment, sharing the video, or a like. It all helps. And now, before I get into any more ramblings, let's just jump into the video. Thank you. Level with me. If Pokemon were in D&D, what class would they be? Hello and welcome to Level With Me, the YouTube channel where we can level up our TTRPG experience together. My name is Will, and before we jump into the explanation for this video, I'm going to throw it out there. A lot of time was spent researching all the Pokemon and thinking about how it correlates with the D&D universe. So if you do appreciate this video, drop a like, drop a sub. I'd really appreciate this because a lot of time and effort went into this one. But the premise for this video is that I have gone through the original 151 Pokemon and labeled every single one of them to the best of my ability with a D&D class. Now, there is a handful of Pokemon that I could not label, so I'm going to ask you to help me label them. There's nothing about them that reflects Dungeons & Dragons, so if you could help me out, I'd appreciate it. Before we get into the list, just a reminder that this table works with shared XP, so any tips, tricks, or thoughts, like I said, if you can help me label the missing Pokemon, I'd appreciate it. Leave those comments to dish out some experience points to the other players in our community, and I'll be sure to read them as well, to get some XP for myself. Let's crack on, because it's going to be a long one. Venusaur, the grass poison type, would definitely be a druid. Venusaur lives for nature. Sorry, Venusaur needs nature to live. Literally. Venusaur spreads its petals on its back out to absorb sunlight and turns that sunlight into energy. Also, Venusaur can be built in the Pokemon universe as either defensive, offensive, or utility, much like a druid with its versatility. Charizard would be a fighter. Now, we know a lot about Charizard from the Pokemon anime. Charizard is always a little bit passag with Ash, thinks it's better than everyone else, and when it comes to a fight, it will not back down to prove that point. Whilst Charizard carries that main character energy, it's also respected by the other Pokemon in Ash's party. In the Pokemon lore, it's also known that Charizard actually flies around the sky seeking out powerful opponents to battle. Fighter. Blastoise is a paladin. Blastoise is slow, it can take a lot of hits, and is a trustworthy all-rounder to have in your party. Its shell is much like the armor of a paladin. It has been known to hide in its shell to increase its defense. In a load of Blastoise's Pokedex entries, it said that it uses its cannons as its go-to attack. Paladin's go-to, and at least it's memed on, it's stereotypical, is Smite. Blastoise has also been known to be the leader of a group of Squirtle, much like a paladin, trying to keep the party on the straight and narrow by stepping up and being the leader at times. Butterfree is a ranger. As an early game bug Pokemon, Butterfree has a lot of utility by learning things like the status powders. However, it doesn't have the best damage output. It is, for me, if I can get it early, a must on the team. However, after the second or third gym, it does become quite situational to what you're facing next, so it could drop off the team later in the game. Beedrill is a fighter. Beedrill's Pokedex entries all refer to it as being aggressive, territorial, and very offensive in its battle style, so you might be thinking, why don't I give it Barbarian? Well, it's because of Beedrill's stats. If I were to give it Barbarian, that means its defenses have to be good. Beedrill's defenses aren't great, because when a Barbarian rages, it halves the damage of piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing damage. Beedrill can't withstand that, hence it's a fighter. Mega Beedrill, however, definitely could be a Barbarian. Pidgeot, leave your thoughts on this, is a monk. Now hear me out. Pidgeot can learn a good mix of both physical and special attacking moves. It's a solid choice for an early flying type Pokemon, but nearer the end, of course, there are better options for you. I'm playing a monk, and I think I'm gonna peak at like level 9. Sick. However, what is truly prominent in Pidgeot's Pokedex entries is that it is fast and it is nimble, being able to reach Mach 2 speeds. So it must have a very high dexterity score. Raticate would be a rogue. Multiple Pokedex entries claim that Raticate uses its whiskers for balance, meaning it's able to sneak and clamber around using its dexterity. Its Pokedex entry from Pokemon Stadium reads, if attacked, it stands up on its hind legs, bares its fangs, and shrieks. If rogues decide to get into the middle of the battle, then you can bet they're doing little chip damage here and there as and when they are threatened. Or they can do what Raticate does best, hide away and get some bonus damage with their sneak attack, much like Raticate's Super Fang. Big damage very quickly. And what are fangs but little daggers? Fearow would be a rogue. Fearow has got decent speed and attack, partnered with its Pokedex entries that actually kind of specify two almost contrasting things that make it a rogue. Its Pokemon Yellow entry reads, if it senses danger, it flies high and away instantly. But then in a future Pokedex entry, it says that it plummets down in one fell swoop to strike its prey. If that is not cunning action hide, bonus action sneak attack, I don't know what it is. I'm going to run away and then go, yeah! It's a rogue, straight up. Arbok would be a barbarian. You may think that this is an odd choice, but multiple Pokedex entries say that it intimidates foes, and that is its ability in the game. Often barbarians are proficient in intimidation. Not only that, in its Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire Pokedex entries, it reads this Pokemon is terrifically strong in order to constrict things with its body. It can even flatten steel oil drums. Once Arbok wraps its body around its foe, escaping its crushing embrace is impossible. Big damage up close. Barbarian. Raichu? Barbarian. Again, it seems like an odd choice. Raichu is usually a special attacker, but actually its attack and special attack are both 90. I didn't know this before starting this video. So I feel it's a justifiable choice when you read multiple Pokedex entries saying that when it stores up too much energy, it gets aggressive and releases 100,000 volts of electricity into its enemies. The counterpart to D&D would be that being Barbarian Rage. Sandslash would be a monk. Yeah. Sandslash's Pokemon Sapphire entry reads as, in battle, this Pokemon will try and make the foe flinch by jabbing it with the spines. It then leaps at the stunned foe to tear wildly with its sharp claws. And in its Pokemon Crystal, Moon, and Shield entries, it reads that it is adept at climbing trees, meaning this Pokemon has very quick attacks and is nimble enough to climb to an elevated area. Nidoqueen would be a paladin. Comparative to Nidoking, Nidoqueen is built a little bit more defensively in its stats. Pokedex entries often mention how Nidoqueen comes into its own when its young are attacked in the den. Paladins can do massive damage when they are attempting to protect others. Nidoking, however, would be a barbarian because all his Pokedex entries are big angry boy will kick your ass! Barbarian! What else could that be? Clefable would be a cleric. Our first cleric is Clefable. Its level up moveset is mainly based around supporting other Pokemon, whether that be to distract, delay, or debilitate the enemies in battle. However, the moves it can learn by TMs are both physical, special, and utility, which kind of reflects how you decide to flavor your cleric in D&D. Ninetales would be a sorcerer. Ninetales' lore is that it's the reincarnation of 9 saints. However, in its Pokemon Sapphire entry, it says the reincarnation of 9 wizards. So why isn't Ninetale a wizard? I'm giving it the sorcerer class because of its pre-evolution, Vulpix. Vulpix has got really none of this mystical lore that Ninetales has, so whether it is the reincarnation of 9 saints or wizards or whatever like that, it evolves and just naturally has these skills. Like a sorcerer is just born talented. That's why it's a sorcerer and not a wizard. Wigglytuff. This is the first Pokemon I'm gonna need help with. Now you ask me about Jigglypuff? No brainer. Bard. We know that its signature thing is to sing. In the Pokemon anime, it's singing all the time. It literally has a microphone. But what does Wigglytuff have? I can tell you a lot of nothing. Wigglytuff's only redeeming base stat is its HP of 140, but it's not a physical attacker like a barbarian. Its level up moveset is not supportive like Clefable, and its cleric status and its Pokedex entries really don't give any flavor to the Pokemon. So it's very hard to label it with a D&D class with nothing to go on. So I'm opening up this to the community. What would Wigglytuff be in the D&D universe? Let me know in the comments. There's gonna be more of that. Pay attention, I'm asking for your help for a few of these. Hello, I'm in a different outfit because there are 10 Pokemon that I forgot about because they have evolutions and in later generations that didn't appear on the website I was using. If you see me in a grey hoodie, I forgot about these Pokemon. Starting with Golbat. Zubat being the most annoying Pokemon in the first generation, somehow I forgot about it. Golbat would be a barbarian. And yes, it is as bad a link as you think it is. Golbat was a hard one, neither its stats nor its biology lean towards it being a barbarian. However, when you read its Pokedex entries, literally all of them are about Golbat having bloodlust. They will not stop until they drain the blood from their victims. That's pretty barbarian-y. I am sure that Crobat will probably be a rogue or something a bit more nimble, but Golbat goes hard. Vileplume would be a druid. I don't want to label all grass types as druids, but that is where Vileplume fits best. Its Pokedex entries constantly talk about it wandering around the forest, its big flower on its head, the toxin that it spreads. Shadow Druid. Parasect would be a warlock. And this is a bit convoluted, so hear me out. It's a bold take, but Parasect is literally being invaded by a parasite that's taking over its very being, much like a warlock patron trying to get invested in the warlock's life and choices and influence how it lives. Not only for this reason, warlocks have limited spell slots, and they often rely on one move, Eldritch Blast. Parasect also has got limited move choices and the types of the moves, and it also has a quad weakness, so it is not the bulkiest against the wrong type of enemy. However, you can always guarantee that a Parasect will be running Spore on its moveset, much like Eldritch Blast, Agonizing Blast on a Warlock. It's a 100% chance to make the enemy fall to sleep with Spore, so of course it's going to fall back on that one thing. Parasect is a Warlock. Venomoth would be a druid. Yet again, another forest-dwelling Pokemon is a druid. I'm sorry. This is because, like Wigglytuff, there's not really much to go on with Venomoth other than it constantly is mentioned to be living in forests. Venomoth isn't in the anime, so you can't really take its attitude from there. The only thing is Venomoth can learn a wide variety of moves in both typing, utility, offensive, and defensive. So I've given it the druid label because that's what druids are good for. Druids are so diverse. Venomoth can be diverse as well. I'm sure someone in the Pokemon community will get pissed off at that take. As Shady Penguin and United Gamer, go and watch that Venomoth sweep. Dugtrio would be a ranger. Dugtrio, again, another hard one to label. All its Pokedex entries say that Dugtrio alternates its three heads moving to move the soil quickly and can reach up to 60 miles per hour. Considering all the Pokedex entries mention it living in dirt, it obviously has a favored terrain, much like a ranger. Also like a ranger, it must be very dexterous. In the Pokemon games, Dugtrio is known as a glass cannon. It's very quick and very offensive. However, its defenses aren't that great, represented by a ranger's hit dice. Does that sound like a stretch? Because it was. It really, really was. Persian would be a rogue. Obviously, Persian is the ace Pokemon of the Team Rocket leader Giovanni. However, little bits of Pokedex entries are also the reason I want to label this as a rogue. Pokemon Stadium, it is extremely temperamental. Pokemon Silver, its lithe muscles allow it to walk around without making a sound. Pokemon Let's Go Eevee, it walks with all the grace and elegance of a proud queen. I think we can all agree that rogues are quite proud in what they can do. And in Pokemon Moon, its preferred tactics are sucker punches and blind side attacks. There's no doubt in my mind that Persian matches up with Rogue really, really well. Golduck would be a Warlock. Yep, it's a weird one again. It's a weird one again. Be honest with me. When playing Pokemon, has anyone ever actually used Golduck? Yeah, I don't know much about it either. Which is why I have to take some liberties with this one. Golduck infamously has psychic powers without being a psychic type. It's got no reason to have those powers, like a Warlock. A Warlock is just a person who has no reason to have these magical powers, other than they sold their soul away. The Warlock didn't study like a wizard, isn't blessed like a sorcerer. Why does Golduck have supernatural powers? On the Bulbapedia, it says that in the episode Bye Bye Psyduck, Golduck acts a bit like Brock by showing off to girls, meaning that Golduck considers itself to have a lot of charisma. It's a stretch. Golduck, what's a stretch? Let me know if you agree. Primeape would be a barbarian, and this is ironic because I'm using Primeape as a barbarian in my D&D Pokemon Let's Play. Let me just read you Pokedex entries for this one. You'll get it. Pokemon Red, always furious and tenacious to boot. Pokemon Ruby, when Primeape becomes furious, its blood circulation is boosted. In turn, its muscles are made even stronger, however, it also becomes much less intelligent at the same time. And I kind of chalk this up to maybe reckless attack. It becomes a lot stronger, like you get advantage on hitting the enemy, but then the enemy also gets advantage on hitting you. So I kind of think that is a vague interpretation of reckless attack. And then in Pokemon Violet, some researchers theorize that Primeape remains angry even inside the Pokeball.
That's my secret, cat. I'm always angry.
Arcanine would be a sorcerer. I've given Arcanine the sorcerer label because it is revered by those around it. Much like sorcerers being naturally talented and everyone being a little bit jealous, Arcanine was supposed to be a legendary beast as seen in the anime. With both attack and special attack sitting at 110 and 100 respectively, it's representative of a sorcerer's ability to be adaptive in combat. Arcanine's base defenses both sit at 80, which is fine, and I think that resembles a sorcerer's ability to deal big damage but not take it quite as well. Poliwrath would be a monk. That's right, not a fighter. Pokedex entries for Poliwrath state that it can swim across the Pacific Ocean without getting tired, and at level 2 in the 2024 Player's Handbook, monks get the ability Uncanny Metabolism, meaning they can just keep going. They also say that Poliwrath's body is made up of pure muscle, but why I'm leaning towards monk and not fighter is because it specifies that Poliwrath is adept at martial arts, not just combat. It's coffee time! Alakazam would be a wizard. First things first, Alakazam's pre-evolution Kadabra is theoretically based on the magician Yuri Geller and his psychic powers. Alakazam's Pokemon Sapphire entry says that this amazing brain gives the Pokemon an astoundingly high IQ of 5,000. It has a thorough memory of everything that has occurred in the world, meaning that it must be very good at learning, studying, and remembering information. Alakazam's stats also very much resemble a wizard. It is one of the highest special attack. It has got brilliant speed, however it can't take a physical attack at all. And lastly, in Alakazam's Let's Go Pokedex entries, it specifies that Alakazam can see the future. I call that a divination wizard. Machamp would be a fighter. Whilst Machamp's dex entries say that it is able to attack and uses immeasurable strength with no deterrent to itself, it mentions nothing about it being an aggressive fighter, so I don't think it would be a barbarian. Pokemon Diamond says that it can launch a flurry of 1,000 punches in 2 seconds, and I think that's quite fitting with a fighter's level 20 ability being to attack 4 times, and it just so happens that Machamp has 4 arms. Is that a stretch? I don't think that's a stretch. I think that's sound logic. Victory Bell would be a ranger. A grass type that is not a druid. You're welcome. Reading through Bulbapedia, it seems that Victory Bell is adept at both hunting and tracking and trapping its prey that it hunts in the jungles. It uses tactics like flicking its vines into the foliage to seem like a wild animal to attract its prey alongside being able to create the alluring smell of honey. This also says to me that Victory Bell is going to be quite good at stealth. Stealth is a dexterity skill in Dungeons & Dragons, therefore I think it's more of a ranger than a druid. Tentacruel would also be a ranger. This is because, like Victory Bell, it has its own way to trap and subdue its prey, but in the ocean. It uses ultrasonic powers from the red orb in its head to stun the enemy, and then uses its tentacles to constrict and poison them. Its Pokemon Blue Pokedex entry uses the phrase "on hunt," which you can imagine a group of rangers doing when looking for food. Golem? I'm not sure about. You think Golem would be easy to label, it is slow, defensive, and capable of dealing out damage when need to. Paladin. However, there is nothing that reflects a caring nature in Golem. Then there's also nothing that reflects an aggressive, angry nature in Golem, so it can't be a barbarian. It's also not in the slightest a special attacker, so that rules out any magic users from D&D. It's not going to be sneaky like a rogue. no repeated favorite terrains, so we can't really label it a ranger, and there's nothing in the anime that makes me want to lean towards one D&D class over another. I'm gonna need help with this one as well, please. I'd like you to know for this one, it's Rapidash. I put monk? Question mark, question mark, question mark? I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote this one. This one is a stretch. Rapidash is said to be able to move up to 150 miles per hour, and that's really the only thing that defines it, so I had to look at its stats. So if you partner that with its decent attack stat and its less than a mediocre HP stat, then it makes a decent candidate for a monk. It's going to be quite dexterous, quite strong, but it's not got the highest hit dice. My face is stuck like this because I'm not sure where to put Rapidash, but monk seemed like the most logical place. Slowbro would be a warlock. Slowbro evolves from a slowpoke when its tail is bitten by a Shelder. Shelder then leaks poison into the tail of the newly evolved Slowbro to make it even spacier, according to its Pokemon Sun Pokedex entry. Shelder quite literally has a hold on this Pokemon, and that is reflective in the metaphorical hold that a Warlock patron has over its host's life. Also, when it evolves, its special attack gets a lot better, therefore Shelder is giving this Slowbro more powers like a Warlock patron. Magneton, I couldn't classify. Magneton's whole thing is that it's 3 Magnemite. Magneton doesn't have its own thing. That is its whole personality and its whole biology. That it is 3 Magnemites stuck together. Farfetch'd would be a fighter. Farfetch'd is often mentioned to be willing to fight to the death for its stick, or its leek, or its vegetable, or whatever the Pokedex entry decides to call it that year. In fact, in Pokemon Red and Blue, it is actually referred to as a sword in that Pokedex entry. Also, one of the Pokedex entries says that it is unable to live without its stick. Farfetch'd will defend it with its life, so it's also a weapon that it uses as a defense mechanism. I think that's a fighter. Also, when you look at Galarian Farfetch'd, that becomes a fighting type and evolves into Sirfetch'd, based on a Knight of the Realm. Farfetch'd is definitely a fighter. Dodrio is a Pokemon I could not place. Despite having 3 heads of differing emotions, it somehow has no features that indicate it being any D&D class. The main focus of Dodrio is that it runs real good, that is all. On Bulbapedia, it doesn't specify any personality or character traits about the Pokemon. So if you know any weird Dodrio facts, leave them in the comments below, because absolutely no idea what to do with Dodrio. Less than Golem. Dugong would be a ranger. All of Dugong's Pokedex entries mention how well it thrives in the water and on icy terrain. In its Ultra Sun Pokedex entry, it says that it preys on Wishy-Washy, so it's very good at tracking. And in its Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl Pokedex entry, it says that it uses snow to camouflage itself from predators. Its highest stat is defense. Whilst it is not wild, it being the highest could represent a ranger's D10 hit dice, being the second highest hit dice available. Also, when we look at its movesets, whilst its moves aren't wildly diverse, there are also a lot of secondary effects that come with those moves, meaning you could run a good utility set with Dugong. I so need a pee. Muck, surprisingly, would be a druid. A feature of Muck is that you will find it in highly polluted areas, cleaning it. It obviously cares about the environment. Is that a leap? That could be a leap. Anyway, its moveset also doesn't stray far from the poison type, so for Muck, it's going to be very, very specific. It's going to be Druid, Circle of the Land, Swamp. This is because of all of these spells that a Swamp Druid comes with also revolve around things that could relate to Muck itself. Plague of Insects, Stink Cloud, you know, just Muck things. Cloyster would be a Paladin. Cloyster to me is a Paladin because its defensive stat is by far its highest stat. Its Pokedex entries say multiple times that it is so defensive that it can withstand a bomb explosion, and to be honest, my brain just went towards Egbert, the Paladin from Oxventure, who withstands multiple explosions from his own bombs, many times. It also says that Cloyster attacks by firing spikes from its shell, and my brain also went, Egbert the Paladin carries a mace has spikes, and therefore it's another Paladin point. I don't know. Paladins are known for soaking up hits, doing good physical damage, and having utility spells, all of which are reflected in Cloyster's stats and level up moveset. Gengar is a rogue. I was thinking that Gengar would be a warlock, however, in none of its Pokedex entries, none of its biology does it ever refer to Gengar being a dark, malevolent spirit. It's more the thing lurking in the shadows, rather than the thing having something lurking over it. Gengar has good speed and special attack, so by the time you realize it's lurking in the shadows, it is over for you. Gengar is the personification, or the Pokemonification, of a rogue's sneak attack. Actually, if anything, reading up about Gengar, it will make a good Warlock patron more than a Rogue or a Warlock. Onix would be a Ranger. Much like Dugtrio being a Ranger, Onix is very situational. It excels in being in a cave and not much else. In fact, weirdly, the tunnels that Onix bores, apparently, Diglett used them as homes, so there's actually a link there as well. In the Pokemon games, Onix has got two quad weaknesses, water and grass, so if you're facing off against a gym like Erika's or you're traveling any water route, then it's highly unlikely Onix is going to make the team, especially because water and grass are two of the most prominent typings in the entire Pokemon series. Onix has a lower attack than Oddish. A lower attack than Oddish! There is no real reason to use an Onix. Hypno, however, is a Warlock. Hypno uses its pendulum and psychic powers to put people to sleep and then feasts on their dreams. It's even been known to carry away those who are having good dreams, which has included children. Not only that, it's said that in the trainer school in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Hypno uses its psychic powers to create illusions, namely by disguising itself as a human and causing illusory children to appear. Pretty trickstery, pretty dark, says Warlock to me. Hypno has a dark backstory, it has a host to feed on, and it uses dark magic tricks to fool those around it. Kingler is a barbarian. I mean, Kingler is definitely a barbarian or a paladin, I guess. Big attack stat for barbarian, big defense stat for paladin. However, if you think of a barbarian rage, I think its defense stat is also reflective of that, now being resistant to slashing, bludgeoning, and the other one, piercing damage. Another reason I'm leaning towards Barbarian is that in its Pokedex entries, it states that Kingler gets very tired because of its huge claw, being a pain to drag around with it. Let's think about that claw as a very strong martial weapon. In a future Pokedex entry, it says that Kingler has been known to open up that bomb-proof shell of Cloyster. Cloyster is a paladin. If there's one thing getting through a paladin's armor, it's a raging barbarian. Electrode is a barbarian for no other reason other than it explodes without provocation. First thing you do when getting into combat as a barbarian? Rage, that's it. For Executor, I literally wrote nothing. There is nothing Executor can do that resembles it being a D&D class. It has 3 heads that all get along, and there's nothing. Executor is a nothing Pokemon. It's there. It's kind of the most mid-druid and mid-wizard. An Executor gets to an age, its head falls off and becomes an Execute. This is... What do I do with this information? What do I do with the biology of an Executor? Marowak, however, is most definitely a fighter. Marowak has got the hidden ability Battle Armor, and its body has been described as sturdy as armor, linking it to a fighter's armor proficiency. One of Marowak's Pokedex entries does say that after evolution, it becomes violent and starts wielding a bone as a weapon. Now, you may think that says Barbarian, but if we go back to Pokemon Red and Blue, the Pokedex entry says it throws the bone skillfully like a boomerang to KO targets. Now to me, that says it's almost like a maneuver dice that a fighter gets, which is why I'm labeling it a fighter. Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan are monks. Now you may say, but they're based on Bruce Lee and Channing Tatum. Bruce Lee and Channing Tatum. You may say that, but you'd be wrong, because it's based on Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, but I don't think that they're fighters. Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan are more acrobatic than they are combative. They do their own stunts, and they learn martial arts growing up. No Pokedex entry specifies aggression or them wielding weapons, so I think it definitely is more suited to be a monk class rather than anything else. Especially Hitmonchan. because it does say after 3 minutes of fighting, Hitmonchan needs a rest, and I know for a fact, playing a monk, that when I am out of key points, I can't really do anything, and I'm just punching. I can't do anything cool. I run out of key points far too quickly. Hitmonchan is definitely a monk. Lickitung, much like Magneton, has got nothing going for it. Except did you know it has a tongue? Did you? Because that's all it says. Lickitung has a tongue. What do I do with that? What do we do with that? Please, you do something with it, because I couldn't. Lickitung is such a bad Pokemon. I'm not looking forward to reading more about Licky Licky when I do the Gen 4 video. Bear. Weezing. Is Raccoon a D&D class? Because that's all I got from Weezing's Pokedex entries in biology. Weezing has been known to break into people's houses and eat their garbage. That is a repeated statement through the Bulbapedia entry for Weezing. However, this isn't like Muck who's doing it to clean the environment, it just loves that stank. Ooh, that was a horrible phrase, I'm sorry. But neither its biology, its learn set, its stats, none of that indicates it being a specific D&D class, so help me over here as well. Weezing, what D&D class would it be? Rhydon would be a fighter. Surprisingly, there's nothing about Rhydon being aggressive in any of the biology or Pokedex entries that I read on Bulbapedia. However, there is a lot of mention about Rhydon having an armor-like hide, being able to take a lot of damage and also deal out a terrifyingly strong amount when you read its biology and its stats. It's been able to tear down buildings with its horn. However, not a barbarian. Chansey is, of course, a cleric. In Chansey's Pokemon Yellow Dex entry, it states that it is a kind-hearted Pokemon, and in its Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu Dex entry, it says that it shares its nutritious eggs with injured Pokemon. This is a nod to the Chansey line's signature move, Soft Boiled, in which Chansey eats an egg and heals itself. Yeah, that was a weird sentence. It's a weird script. Chansey's a weird Pokemon when you really think about it. Chansey's level up moveset also very much indicates that it's a cleric, with moves like a Life Dew, a Heal Pulse, Helping Hand, and Healing Wish. And, of course, the most obvious point for Chansey being a cleric is that it's Nurse Joy's psychic at all the Pokemon centers in the anime, willingly spending its time healing Pokemon. Tangela. The obvious choice would be a Druid, but it doesn't lean towards a druid, it actually leans towards another class, but not enough for me to classify it as that class. I couldn't classify Tangela. It doesn't mention much about Tangela living in the forest or thriving from nature or anything like that, so it's definitely not a druid. And the other class that I think it leans more into is a rogue, because under Tangela's vines, no one knows what it looks like. It's a very hidden, literally a hidden away Pokemon. And then this is a silly one. In its Pokemon Crystal Dex entry, it says that it wiggles its vines to straight up annoy its opponents, and who else is more annoying in combat than a rogue? Nobody. Rogues are the most annoying in combat. Fact. But then it comes to, again, the movesets and the stats don't resemble a rogue either, and its biology doesn't resemble a druid, so I don't know what to label it. The stats are middling, the personality is lacking, and the moveset isn't exactly the most diverse, so yet again I ask for your help. What the hell is Tangela? Kangaskhan would be a paladin. We're going to start with a Pokedex entry here. Pokemon Silver. To protect its young, it will never give up during battle, no matter how badly wounded it is. A paladin will follow their faith to the end to protect those who they love, unless it's, Oath of Vengeance, in which case, go to town, kick some ass, why not? The Pokedex entries are primarily based around it caring for the young that it carries in its pouch, and subsequently that does turn into raging and protecting. However, that is not Kangaskhan's main personality trait. And even though its stats are mainly attack, in several ways it gives the general vibe of more protector than aggressor. Seadra, again, is an unclassified Pokemon. Maybe there's a reason that I forgot about all these Pokemon. Seadra is another middling kind of Pokemon with a base stat total of only 440. Its level up movesets are primarily Water and Dragon, but nothing else. Apparently it can swim backwards because of its fins. Good. Seeking, surprisingly, would be a bard. Our first bard has appeared on page 8 of the script. I mean, if Jigglypuff were here, that would have been a long time ago, but Seeking is our first bard, and this is why. I didn't know a lot about Seeking before this video, but Bulbapedia speaks a lot about it wanting to court a mate, about it trying to be beautiful, and about it dancing. So if you asked me before D&D 2024, I might be a bit confused. However, D&D 2024 Player's Handbook has both the College of Dance and the College of Glamour readily available to make your bard, which I think both relate to Seeking. Starmie! Starmie made me want to take some real creative liberties with what defines a D&D class. However, I couldn't find myself to do it. Starmie is a very odd one that I could not classify in D&D. There's not enough information to back Starmie up being any particular D&D class. It's said that Starmie sends up mysterious radio signals to the sky, and in my head I was like, yo, that could be it trying to contact its warlock patron? That's too far. That's too much of a stretch. It says it's supposed to be extraterrestrial, or it's believed to be extraterrestrial, but that is not enough information to base a class on. The rest of the Bulbapedia entry, it doesn't describe anything. There is nothing else interesting or viable about Starmie making it a D&D class, which is such a shame because I think Starmie is underrated in the Pokemon games. It has a good moveset, good stats, and I just wanted more for Starmie, but if you can label Starmie with a D&D class, please do, but I couldn't think of anything for Starmie. Mr. Mime would be a wizard. Its Pokemon Gold Pokedex entry does state that it's a skilled mime from birth. However, it then goes on to say that it gains the ability to create invisible objects as it matures. The key phrase there being, as it matures, as it learns, as it furthers its powers. And that is why I didn't make Mr. Mime a sorcerer. This is why it's a wizard. It wants to further the magic that it can do to help it in battle and in combat and in social situations. Mr. Mime can create invisible walls enough to withstand the strongest attack, which could relate to Shield, a level 2 wizard spell, and it says that it can make things it mimes real once those objects are believed, meaning Mr. Mime could be a conjuration wizard. Scyther would be a rogue. I chalk this up to it will be a fighter or a barbarian, but there is nothing much about it being aggressive and a lot about it being nimble, quick, and hard to see. Scyther's Pokedex entries multiple times in multiple ways basically say this is a rogue and does sneak damage. It's too fast to see, it's a ninja-like ability and speed, it leaps out of tall grass and slices its prey, some call it a ninja. If it hides in tall grass, its protective colours makes it invisible. This is very much leaning into a rogue's stealth aspect and then jumping out and inflicting some mad damage. I think Scyther could specifically be an assassin rogue. Jinx would be a bard. I thought Jinx was actually going to be a primarily spell-based class because of the psychic powers it has. However, it's repeatedly mentioned that it moves as if it were dancing, that people seem to inadvertently move along with Jinx because of its movements, and composers even write songs for Jinx to sing along to. This was honestly one of the more surprising labels that I came up with writing this script, because I really thought that Jinx would have something more mystical to it. But it doesn't. It just loves to sing and a dance. Electabuzz would be a fighter. And I'm gonna take a little bit of a leap here, because if you look at any Pokemon fan game, it makes its evolution Electivire an electric fighting type. Electabuzz itself, though, can learn a lot of fighting moves. It can also learn the elemental punches by TM, and in its Pokedex entries, it's said to be very competitive with other Electabuzz. The competitive nature for Electabuzz comes from whenever there is a thunderstorm, Electabuzz will compete against each other to get to the highest point to get to the electricity in the air. This to me says Electabuzz has proficiency in athletics, something that's very common to find in a fighter build. Magmar would be a ranger, with its background being that it was literally formed in a volcano and that it resides around the mouth of active volcanoes. It's obvious that Magmar has a favoured environment. In both its black and white Pokedex entries as well as its platinum Pokedex entry, it's said that it uses its own fire to camouflage itself, meaning it is adept in hiding in its main terrain. Not only that, but in the 23rd chapter of the Pokemon Adventures, it says it's competitive, and if it's ever defeated, it will literally hunt down the opponent for another fight, meaning that it's got to be very, very good at tracking. Pinsir would be a fighter. That's right, not a barbarian. Surprisingly, there is nothing about Pinsir being aggressive. If anything, it's the opposite. When you look at Mega Pinsir, it says that it gets so excited that it can fly that it never touches the floor. This doesn't sound like a Pokemon that's going to be raging very often, so I want to make it a fighter. A third of Pinsir's level up movesets are actually fighting type moves, as well as Pokedex entries saying that what it cannot crush, it'll throw. So evidently, it's a very athletic Pokemon. But while I say athletic, if we think of the horns as martial weapons, then it's definitely more of a fighter than a monk. It isn't said to show active aggression or rage, it literally carries its own heavy-duty weapons. I think it's a definite fighter for me more than barbarian or monk. Tauros, however, definitely is a barbarian. Let me just read you some Pokedex entries and let's see what we think. Pokemon Ruby. This Pokemon is not satisfied until it is rampaging at all times. Pokemon Black and White. It's famous for its violent nature. And Pokemon Violet. They fight each other by locking horns. The herd's protectors take pride in their battle-scarred horns. Need I say any more? Gyarados is definitely a barbarian. Let's read some Pokedex entries, and you tell me what you think. Pokemon Red, huge and vicious. It's capable of destroying entire cities in a rage. Pokemon Sapphire, there are records of this Pokemon's rampages lasting a whole month. Pokemon Shield, once it begins a rampage, a Gyarados will burn everything down, even in a harsh storm. Need I say more? Lapras, surprisingly as a fan-favorite Pokemon, I could not find anything to label it with a D&D class. Lapras features quite a bit in the Orange Island episodes of the Pokemon Let's Play. It's given to you as a gift Pokemon in the 1st generation and in the 6th generation, and yet there's no defining details, quirks, or history about it. It's been known to sing, but other than that, nothing relates to a D&D class. It says it's quite docile, so it gets hunted a lot. Doesn't really fit a fighting class. It's bulky, so it could be a paladin or a cleric, but it's not aggressive, so it can't be a barbarian. It's not exactly the stealthiest, so it can't be a rogue. It's a physical attacker and special attacker, so I don't want to label it a wizard or a sorcerer. It's not exactly the meanest Pokemon, so it's not a warlock. I don't know what to label it as, really. It has the weakest of links towards being a bard. It likes to sing, it has an affinity for people. It's a fan favorite with no defining features. It's just a sturdy Pokemon to have in your party. Ditto, however, is definitely a druid. If there's anything that can use wild shape, it's a Ditto. Ditto can become anything from a Caterpie to a Mewtwo using their moves and abilities and skills. Ditto, hands down, druid, which kind of makes Eevee not stand out, because Eevee's also a druid for the same reason, but it can only wild shape into 8 things, and it can only do it once because when it's evolved it can't go back. So Zimbabwe, thank you for your comment on Reddit when I posted this question there, but it's kind of fell short just because Eevee follows Ditto in the Pokedex. Eevee's the one base form Pokemon in this video, by the way, and it's just been absolutely stepped on by the fact Ditto came before it in the Pokedex directly. Omastar is the one fossil in Generation 1 that I couldn't label. The only thing Omastar is known for is the fact that it was so slow, that's probably why it went extinct, and it has a small beak, and... well, that's it. That's pretty much all its Pokedex entries. We can move on to the next one, which is Kabutops, and Kabutops was fairly easy to label. Kabutops would definitely be a fighter with arms essentially being martial weapons. Kabutops is a way easier D&D class to label. It's obviously very athletic because it can reach 29 knots in the water, and whilst Pokedex entries say that it slices up its prey and drinks their internal fluids, I don't quite want to label it as a barbarian because it's not a recurring theme that it's an aggressive Pokemon. So I think Kabutops is definitely a fighter. Aerodactyl would be a barbarian. Aerodactyl, like Kabutops, isn't firmly stated to be aggressive or that it rampages. However, it is described as vicious, ferocious, and having saw-like fangs that they use to shred their enemies. So it's a little bit more of an aggressor than Kabutops, I think. Last page, baby, last page. Second to last page. Okay, second to last page, baby. Snorlax would be a paladin. Snorlax is slow and heavy, but it can deal real damage when needed. It's a solid pick for any team. Like I say, it can take damage, it can deal damage when needed, but also it has good utility in tactics such as using rest and then eating a chesto berry to wake up at full health. One spell that paladins can learn is Purify Food and Drink, and Snorlax needs 880 pounds of food per day, and it's said that it can stomach food that's even as poisonous as muck. So I think Snorlax, being a paladin, having Purify Food and Drink would be very beneficial. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres are undefined. I was prepared to give all three legendary birds the Ranger class because of, I assumed, their known environments. That's all we really know them for, but alas, they weren't really Rangers. Weirdly, none of the three legendary birds have any defining features that really lend themselves towards being a D&D class. However, their Galarian counterparts, that's a different point entirely. The Galarian counterparts have a lot more going for them. Their stat spreads lend themselves to individual D&D classes, the biology behind them and how they behave lends themselves towards more D&D classes, and also their mentality lends themselves towards being individual D&D classes. But sadly, the Kantonian legendaries don't have that. No classes are screaming at me for either Articuno, Zapdos, or Moltres. Dragonite is a cleric. Dragonite is known as the Sea Guardian in its Pokemon Stadium Pokedex entry, and it's known as Kind-Hearted in its Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire Pokedex entries. It flies across the ocean and saves seafarers from distress. It's been known to save those who are drowning and lead them to shore. A Pokemon who cares for others like that is definitely a cleric. It can also learn utility moves, it's decent at attack, and can take up a lot of hits. Mewtwo is a warlock. Mewtwo was genetically created using DNA from Mew, however it is known to have the most savage heart. In Pokemon the first movie, it's almost like Giovanni is Mewtwo's warlock patron, demanding him to do his bidding. Mewtwo promptly destroys the entire laboratory, takes an island for himself, and invites trainers from all around the region to battle him. He clones their Pokemon and battle to the death ensues. Pretty warlocky. If any Pokemon is chaotic, evil, warlock vibes, it's Mewtwo. And lastly, Mew. Mew is a druid. Mew is said to contain the DNA of all Pokemon. Mew also has the ability to learn any move and also naturally learns the move Transform. That is the only other Pokemon other than Ditto that can learn it naturally by level up. Druids have the ability to turn into any animal, from rats to Triceratops, thus meaning it can have a wide variety of skills, abilities, and attacks, just like Mew. And that is all the fully evolved Pokemon from Generation 1. Or is it? Porygon. Porygon is a Warforged. Plot twist. We are ending on a man-made Pokemon that has a specific trait that it doesn't eat or breathe, like a Warforged. Porygon was made with technology that was advanced for its time. Medieval machinery, computer data. What's the difference? Porygon is definitely a Warforged. Fight me on it. And that is all the fully evolved Pokemon in the original 151. Any tips, tricks, or thoughts on the subject, leave them down in the comments to dish out some XP to the players in our community, and I'll see you in the next video. See you later.